Okay, welcome everyone to another live Q&A with Prentus, and I am your host, Rod Dannon, founder and CEO of Prentus, and today we get to talk to Jae Taylor, who is a director of product management at one of the best companies, and also a 2-times founder, as well as a person just interested in mentorship and helping others. So really excited to have him on board and get into the details. So first off, one sec, I'm getting a little bit of an echo on your side, Jay.
I may have been trying to watch the live stream as we do it. I just turned it off.
Okay, all good. I thought it was breaking already. I'm like, damn. But yeah, so tell everyone where you're calling in from today, Jay.
So I'm in the Seattle area, so just outside of Seattle, just a little east.
Gotcha. And you have any red skies over there?
You know what? It has been like the last few days. It just kind of just happened. The sky's super gray. I've got some colleagues in San Francisco. They say it's dark. It looks like it's 10 p.m. over there. So yeah, it's definitely affecting the Northwest up here.
No, yeah, the photos I saw out of San Fran is just like straight red sky, like apocalyptic.
Right.
That stuff's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, Seattle's usually a little bit gray, so not too different for you.
Well, you know what? September is probably the most beautiful time of year around here. So it's kind of messing with our September a little bit, but yeah, you're right.
I can see that. Yeah, I'm in Miami, so we don't have seasons. So
you have hurricane season.
Hurricane season, but that's all time. There's always one type of hurricane, another.
Right.
But yeah, so let's take it from the top, Jay. I mentioned to everyone how you're a self-taught developer. So let's start there. And like, what were you doing before you got into development?
So I was actually an office assistant for Washington State government. So, but when I was young in high school, I always had kind of an interest in getting into the tech industry, and I would buy books on software development, and I'd read the books. And I remember always going to like trips to Costco with my mom and like trying to pick one of the Microsoft books up because they used to sell those there. So I was always interested ever since I was pretty young. But I was, I would say at the beginning, I was definitely interested. I was an office assistant for Washington State government. And so I wanted to get into tech, but I didn't have a bachelor's degree. So that was a little bit of a hurdle, I thought, at least at the beginning. And I think, when I tell people my story, there's what I did, and then there's what I would recommend other people do. Because I do think there were definitely some years in there that were a little bit wasted.
Yeah, we all make mistakes.
Oh yeah, but that's what I was doing. Yeah, like I grew up in the Olympia area, which is the state capital of Washington. And I grew up in an area where everybody kind of aspired to be working for government because people in government like never get fired. They get the best job security, decent money. And at the time, I felt like I was doing pretty good. I think the minimum wage was like $5 an hour and I was making like $12 an hour. So I thought I was doing pretty good, but yeah. I started having kids and I got married when I was pretty young. I was 20 when I got married, was a dad at 21, had my second daughter. I think I was like 25. So, the bill started to rack up and that office assistant salary,
Yep. Kids are expensive, man.
Wasn't cutting it.
Yeah. So then it was mostly like a monetary thing. You're like, hey, I got to do something to like support my kids right now. I gotta go get something else.
Yeah. I started thinking about all the expenses and the type of life I wanted for my kids. I grew up in a pretty modest household. I had great parents, but we had a, modest income. So I didn't do a lot of vacations, and I wanted to take my kids to Disneyland. I wanted to take them to Hawaii. I wanted to take them places that I had never been. And that stuff is expensive. And so it made me start thinking bigger about, what can I do? Because this is not going to work.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, man. Like I feel you on the modest like stuff. I didn't go on vacations at all. I think I went to Disney like twice, but we live in Florida, so it's a standard thing.
Right. Yeah.
So then once you decided like, okay, I'm gonna change my life, make some more money. How do you decide specifically development?
Well, what's interesting is so what I did, because, and I'm not sure exactly why I thought this, but it did work. So what I tried to do, I didn't actually pick like development or any specific area, because
Yeah.
I think especially when you're new in tech, you don't know what's out there. All you know is that you want to work and do techie stuff, but you may not know the job roles. And mind you, this is like back in the late 90s. So, Google maybe was around, but it was a lot less prevalent, right? So I couldn't just go Google and find all this stuff out as easily.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted a better paying job. I knew tech was it. Microsoft obviously was super hot back then still. And so I knew I wanted to get into it. And I only knew coding. I didn't know anything else around it as far as what I did research on. And so what I did was I would talk to my boss, and I try to find anything technical I could do, anything. Things like being the person that was responsible for upgrading the systems that we used, even though maybe the upgrade was super easy, but I would try to find, technical kind of work. And my purpose for that was I wanted to transform my resume. So even though I had all these typical office assistant duties, I wanted to try to get as much tech related stuff on there so that if somebody could look past my title, they would see that I was actually, trying to do a lot more than your typical, office assistant. And that did
your way in.
Yeah. And that did actually work for me. The reason I would absolutely not recommend doing that is because I did that for years. And I tell people, and it's just my personal opinion, my 2 cents, but never waste your time trying to prove something to people who don't want to be proven to. Because some folks and some organizations, they just have a way of thinking. And if you don't fit in that mold, it's going to be very difficult for you to advance there. So I tell people, when you get into this type of situation like that, I would leave. I would find another organization. I will say though, I was able to kind of like get a kind of tech job, and then I got another kind of tech job within government, and then I was finally able to land a development job where I did more like data analyst and data management and a little bit of software engineering in that role. So I was able to land one that way. It just took way too long.
Okay, so what year was that you got that first tech role?
2005.
2005, first developer role. And then, like when you got that job, what did they mention? Like, oh, we see like you have your hands on like all these other kind of technical things. Like that's why they took you, or was it like something else that's a secret?
Well, so I would say that I always came to the interviews like super prepared and there to impress. Like I remember, like I would bring like, back when we had paper and we actually used paper, I would bring like binders of like examples of work that I did, resumes, recommendations, and I would have copies of these binders for everyone on the interview panel, and I would pass it out. Because if nothing else, I wanted everyone to know that I wanted this job, and that if they gave me an opportunity, that there was nobody that was going to outwork me. And I think that matters. And even now, as a hiring manager for big tech companies, if people have passion and excitement, and that's so much of it, because most people, arguably all people, can learn. Like we could all learn how to do a job, but passion, excitement, enthusiasm, that's really what's going to make you learn faster if you truly want it. And so I was really good about making sure that every time I went to an interview, that they knew that I really, really wanted the job. I did research on the job. I did research as much as I could anyway, to find out what I needed to know. And I would let them know that this is important to me, and I would do whatever I could to kind of give that kind of impression to them.
No, that makes sense. And like I harp on that also. It's just like if an employer sees you and they're like, and you're showing how excited you are about the opportunity, and you stress that you're going to learn, then it makes them interested. They're like, okay, like what can this person really do? Mm-hmm. And that makes them more likely to take a chance. And one advantage of like, bootcamp grads, for anyone watching, is you went through a program. So you just proved like, hey, I want to learn. Like I just put 6, 9, whatever, how many months of your life, mm-hmm. and how many thousands to learn this skill. So stress that and make sure that, whoever's interviewing knows that.
Yeah. Because that's definitely a big level of commitment that you volunteered for this endeavor. So it absolutely speaks volumes. Yeah.
So that's great. And so then, in your first developer job, how did you like, get adjusted to it at first? Like, because like you said, Google wasn't as developed as now. Like now, there's tutorial for every little thing.
Mhm.
So it's easier to be self-taught, but like, how did you go about it? Were you like a newbie asking questions every second?
I'm sure I was, but the thing is, like, I learned this lesson like early in my state career. I had a lady that I worked for. I used to ask questions all the time. I wouldn't even try to do the research. I would just ask, and she kind of taught me at a pretty young age. I think I was like maybe 17, 18 years old. Uh, she would always very patiently kind of say, well, did you check or did you look here? And so she very politely told me to do my research before I start asking questions. And so, and I think that's fair. Like, I think there's a
Yeah.
balance there. Like, there is definitely a time to ask questions, but do some research. Because if you just ask questions, now you're just being lazy. You're just saying, hey, can you spoon feed me? No, like, especially in tech, you can't be spoon fed because there's too much to know. And so you have to be able to go out. You got to be able to go out and feed yourself. And so I would do as much research as I could. I'd buy books. But then, like, I remember for the first tech job, there was somebody there that fortunately could teach me the ropes. And so I was doing something called SAS development. So it's statistical analysis software.
Oh, I
So
mean,
yeah. So I was the data manager for HIV and AIDS for the Department of Health. And I would build like probabilistic matching algorithms between like hepatitis C clients and HIV patients to look for commonalities. And we would do a lot of data analysis and send it up to the CDC. Fortunately for me, a lot of that stuff was already done. So quick shout out to Anna Mada. She did all this and she taught me how to do it. And so what I would do is I would read up as much as I could. I would learn SAS. I would buy books. And then I would try to ask intelligent questions to her. So at least to me, it showed like respect for her time. I wouldn't ask questions that I knew I could probably look up myself. And so it was a little bit of definitely her teaching me, but then also as much research as I could and trying to find ways to improve it. Because one of the big things that I did was I took this process and I automated it, because before it was like a lot of scripts that you had to run, and it took maybe a day and a half to run. And so I started learning more coding on my own. I built a .NET C# application that automated the whole process to run, I think, in like 10 minutes with one button click. Whereas before it was very like, run this script, compare these notes, run this next script, compare these notes. And so that was kind of like my big like first project was I figured there's no reason why we have to do this manually. And so I built an app to automate that.
no, that's impressive. And like, I think that's one advantage of, new blood is that there's new perspective and often newer methods of things. So, you have someone that's been doing, like I had someone at Amex that was the database person for 20 years and, he was set in his ways, but then like me or someone else comes in and we're like, all right, like you could do this quicker in Python. And he's like, that's the way that you can add value from the first month or first 3 months or whatever it is.
Right. But yeah, I mean, so when I got that job, it was great because like you kind of mentioned this earlier, like at the beginning, you kind of need somebody to take a chance on you, right?
Yeah.
And Maria Corrigan was my boss, and she, I'm forever indebted to her because she finally let me in. Because think about it, I was trying to get into IT ever since 16, and I didn't land my first job until I was 25.
Wow.
Okay,
Journey.
So that means, and I worked for the government from 18 to 25. So for 7 years, I was trying to prove to my bosses that I could do a job that they just, because I didn't have a bachelor's degree, they just wouldn't hire me for, right? And that's why I'm like, that time could have been cut in half. I should not have been there that long and tried that route. It did end up working for me, but later on through my career, I learned when I left government, I actually wanted to start my own company because, again, I tried to find like better jobs outside of state because there were reasons why I think state wasn't a great fit for me.
Yeah.
And as I was looking for other jobs, again, I was stumped by the bachelor's degree. But, mind you, at this time, I had 2 daughters, right? I'm married. I was working 2 jobs to take care of my household, and I was trying to go to college at night.
Wow.
And I needed, like, this wasn't going to work. So I was like, okay, I need to find a better job. And so when I tried to go get other jobs, I would get stopped at the bachelor's degree, to the point that I just said, forget it. Okay, I know I can do this. So this is when I started my own software consulting company, and I did that for about 6 years.
Oh, wow. So you made the leap, like it. So instead of waiting for someone to hire you to code, you're like, all right, like I'm gonna run it and code for companies.
Absolutely. And this is what I tell people to do, because the problem that happens is that people go to school, they go to boot camps, they get a good base education, and then they try to apply for jobs, but all these entry-level jobs still want like 2 years experience or 3 years experience. And you're like, what does that even mean? Like, is how it doesn't make any sense, right? So what I tell people is that okay, apply for jobs, but don't stop there. Like, there's nothing stopping you from going to the Department of Licensing, getting a business license for $30, and go build a company. And that's exactly what I did. Like, I started posting on Craigslist for different jobs, and I was looking at competitors to see what people were charging. So I tried to undercut them a little bit, because I was still fairly new in tech.
Yeah.
So I undercut a little bit, but I got a certain level of clients, but there was enough. There was a lot, and then the cool thing was, I didn't have to just jump ship. What I was able to do was negotiate with my boss at state government for part-time. And at that time, the financial crisis was starting to hit too. So they were kind of okay with that. They were like, okay, part-time sounds good. That way I could keep my benefits, and then do both. Like, I worked for the state and I did my own consulting. And then after a while, when business started getting better, I did quit the state altogether.
Wow. No, it's powerful stuff. And I get what you're saying with, you could build a company, you can be a contractor, whatever it is. I think it's a little bit harder nowadays though, because you have competition from all over the world, and with stuff like Upwork, for example, even though it's a bigger market, it's like there's people that can undercut you as well.
That's true, but at the same time, the reason I did it that low is because some of it was a confidence thing, right? Like, I didn't want to charge what I didn't think I was worth. Yeah. But as I kind of paid attention, and I realized that I was actually worth more. And so I started to up my prices. And kind of the old saying of, you get what you pay for, sometimes can be true in tech. Like, if somebody's willing to do work for you for almost nothing, like, what's the reason behind that? Like, if they're new to tech and they want to learn and they tell you that, I think that's super awesome. You could definitely potentially trust that person and work with them. But if they're just cheap for the sake of being cheap, you have to ask yourself why, right? Because tech is one of those things where, how do you know if they're actually working like really hard on your project, or if they're doing a whole lot of nothing? Because I definitely had a lot of experiences where I would hire developers to work for me to do a client project, and I'm pretty sure they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But they would definitely argue with me for a paycheck. So it's one of those things where you have to balance it, and things like reputation and referrals help a lot. Like, if you do good work, typically people will refer you to other folks that they know to do good work. So that sometimes would work out for me too.
No, that's true. And like, yeah, for building an initial portfolio, I get it. Working for free for companies saying, hey, like, I noticed this, like, let me just build you a new solution, something like that.
Right.
But then, what you mentioned on like the lower price, like in my last startup, like, I hired some agency, and I was first time founder trying to save a few dollars. And then months go by and I don't really have a product ready. I get a CTO and they're like, how many hours did they say they work? Like, they did not do that.
Right. And it's hard too, because, if you've ever been a software engineer, you understand that sometimes, can you spend like a week trying to troubleshoot the same problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could. And then you end up scrapping it and having to start over. And that's why I tell people too, like, especially if you're in tech, your job is not to be a JavaScript developer. Okay. So never think of it that way. You're a problem solver.
Yeah.
And if you just focus on one type of technology, now granted, to start, you probably should just focus on something just for simplicity. But just remember that your job is to solve problems. What if JavaScript is not the right, language for this problem. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so it's kind of one of those things that you got to think bigger and even have a better perspective of what's available in the marketplace, especially in tech, because technology's changed so fast. Understand why maybe certain trends are going towards a certain technology, because there could be a certain way that language handles some type of structure that makes it better for certain situations, right? And understand what that is, because you're always going to have to learn something new. That's never going to change in tech.
Yeah, and that's the fun part and the difficult part is like you're always learning something new. You got to stay adapting to whatever the market is.
Yeah,
like you said, like I love that analogy of, you know, if you always have a hammer, like everything looks like a nail. I think I just botched it, but yeah, that makes sense. Like you can't use the same solution for every single problem.
Right. And that's why even too, like your best skill, especially in tech companies and just in the modern world now, is your ability to learn. Can you learn new things? Mm-hmm. Because that's never going to change. And so, you know, if you can learn and get really good at one thing and potentially you'll have jobs, right? Like there's still people out there that program in COBOL. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But the problem is a lot of those jobs eventually are going to fade away. And you don't want to be caught in one of these, you know, downsizing situations where companies have to cut. And because you aren't on the new platform, you're still coding on the old platform, they just deprecate your entire organization. I mean, that stuff happens all the time. So paying attention to what's happening in the market, it matters, and you should. And it's not difficult. You know, if you know, Google is a gold mine, you know, yeah. LinkedIn is a gold mine. You can find out what's happening.
No, that's true. And that applies to all industries, like not only tech, because like I've seen people in like bookkeeping and they're using the same programs from the 90s, but you know, you got to get on QuickBooks. Everyone uses QuickBooks. So you got to adapt no matter what position you're in.
That's true. Very true.
So back to, you know, you started this consultancy. You said you were in that for 6 years. So it's like, what kind of companies did you end up working with? And also, what did your team look like?
Sure. So, I worked with all kinds of companies, all kinds. I'm trying to think of like food manufacturing companies. I worked with travel agencies. I worked with like anywhere from like, you know, a 1-person owner to a 50-person company. One of the probably the most notable projects that I was on was I was hired by a CEO of a company called VentScreen. And I built most of his engineering organization, including his web server team and the business intelligence dashboards. And we went to Las Vegas. We won a bunch of national awards. He ended up getting $35 million in venture capital funding, which was really great. So I learned a lot from that experience. And again, people ask, how did that happen? Well, so here's the thing: like everybody doesn't have $200 an hour to go hire the top tier consultants, right? And I, being at a different tier, and I didn't want to charge that much, I was only charging like $50 an hour. And I found him on Craigslist. Like he found me. I was posting on Craigslist. He found me, but he was already the owner of a very successful vending company. And so he was trying to do another startup. But there's a lot of people that have a certain level of money that they can pay, but there's a big difference between $50 an hour and $200 an hour, right? So he had money to spend, but didn't want to spend that much, obviously. So he's looking for somebody that could, execute on his vision. And so I was able to do that. I think I ended up hiring maybe like 15 people, and we built a lot of his software. So that was a lot of fun, and we gained a lot of experience. So all kinds of companies, websites, and I think educational companies. Yeah, all kinds.
And that makes sense in what you said. Like you're at a different tier, and like understand your tier. Mm-hmm. And then one thing I know people bring up is like, how do I compete with this person overseas doing it for like $5 an hour? One thing I would mention is like showing that you understand the person's business, which is kind of like what you mentioned. Because like, I've literally worked with someone overseas, and I'm like, like put this comment here, and they would like they write out the text, this comment here. And it's that kind of stuff. Like, so that's why like people, even if you're a junior right now, like at least the least you could do is like understand someone, and that's a benefit.
It's a huge benefit because, and it's funny, I was going to say exactly what you said. The problem is they will do exactly what you tell them to do. And I had a buddy of mine who experienced this, and he dropped a lot of money. And I remember, I don't remember exactly what the problem was, but the way he described it, I was like, I don't remember. It's something to do with databases and backups and something. But the way he said it, and then he told me what they were doing. And I was kind of like, do you think it sounds like they're actually physically replicating your database like again and again and again. And I'm like, I don't think that's the way you're supposed to do that. And to be fair, I mean, that's what he asked for.
Yeah.
but that's the thing about consulting, I think that you'll learn is that, and having been a consultant, a lot of times clients don't really know what they're asking for. What they have is a problem. Again, problem solver, right? They have a problem. And a lot of times clients will give you a solution. Can you build me this report? If you're a really good consultant, you're going to ask them why. What are you going to use this report for? What do you think that this number is going to do for you? And then they'll start to explain, well, here's my problem and here. And then you realize, no. You actually don't need that at all. Why don't we just do this? And I think your ability to have that conversation is what makes you valuable. And anybody that's worked with any developer understands there's a difference between one that's going to take the time to understand your problem and one that's just going to do exactly what you asked for. Right? Like there's a big difference. So yes, you might be competing with somebody that's charging $5 an hour, but remember, like you get what you pay for. Like they will likely do exactly what they're told. So if the business owner is not savvy enough to be very specific, I know many instances where it didn't go well. And again, that's not always true, but it can be true.
Yeah, no, thank God you answered that, because like I was going to ask, like with those, I feel like also at the lower range, like you're dealing with companies that don't know what they want, and like then you kind of guess and you show them, and then they're like, no, like that's horrible, and then you kind of wasted time. So I think that's another thing people are scared of. So
yeah,
your recommendation just be to ask questions, basically clarify.
Absolutely, ask questions and make sure you understand the real problem, because what they could be trying to do is solution for a symptom. So it's kind of like if you have a health problem and all you ever do, they just give you drugs, and they give you antibiotics every time. Why don't you find out why you keep getting the infection? Like, let's talk about that, right? And I think if you do that, clients, customers, everyone, most people, they really, really appreciate that, because you're actually very interested in solving their real problem, and you're more invested in doing what's best for them versus trying to make a quick buck. Like if you're just trying to execute on whatever they're saying, that's not where you're going to add the most value. Actually take the time, learn their business too. Like if you understand what their business is and what their real problem is, you can even make suggestions, and I think that that's been a powerful part of being an entrepreneur, is that like, don't ever sit around and wait for someone to tell you what to do. Understand their problem, understand the real problem, and also think to yourself, what other things could you do? What other things have they not mentioned? And start suggesting these things, because even as a boss, you love people like that. When you have, because if as a boss, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because if you are, everybody's staring at you saying, what do I do next? And that's not what you want. You want to hire people that are way smarter than you. And so all you have to do, if anything, is unleash them. I mean, that's what you want. So people don't wait to be told what to do. Figure it out. There's problems out there. You can figure them out.
Exactly. Like, so you go through this boot camp, you've learned already. So you have knowledge that, clients might not have. So you can leverage that.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Absolutely.
So my next question was going to be like how you got into product management, but I think I'm getting the gist is like you running this consultancy, and then you kind of act as a product manager, with all these different projects going, right?
To be honest, so here's kind of my thought on this. Like when you get into bigger companies, like really big companies, there's a lot of reasons why they start to compartmentalize roles, because there's efficiency reasons and even promotional things that make sense, right? Like but honestly, I don't worry about what title I have, because if you look at my resume, I've been a business intelligence developer, data analyst, engineering manager, product manager, engineering program manager. I've done like every role because I'm not any of these things, right? I am all of these things. So I think I got kind of pushed into product management because my favorite part of all of this is the strategy and the vision and working with customers and the design and what is the problem we're going to solve. Because I love those things more than maybe the engineering part, that's kind of how I ended up in product. But I would say, there's a base skill set that you should have. A lot of it is around being able to ask questions and solve problems. And there's many slices that you could join into. But for me, I think the most interesting part ended up being product. But it wasn't something that I chose. Even a lot of my career circulated around data, and I never chose data. I never said, this is what I want to do. Data chose me every time, because every time I would go to a company, that would always be like the number one problem. Like they're trying to make decisions and they had no visibility, or data was everywhere, or that was always the problem. And so I always ended up with some type of data related role. So I'll give an example. I'll jump ahead a little bit, but when the economy started to get kind of weird again, back in the financial crisis days and back in the early 2010, 2011, my business started to suffer a little bit because of that. And so this is when I went to Expedia, and I took a temp role. I worked really hard, and I was able to convince them to give me a full-time role. And so as I was working at Expedia, I'm losing my thought here. What were we talking about?
Get into product management.
Product management. Okay, data. That's right. Sorry about that. So I get into Expedia, and like that was one of the big things that I saw. Like one of the first project that they had me do was around data and creating some dashboards for them.
Okay.
But as I kind of looked around again, like the entrepreneurial mindset that I tell a lot of people to have, like look around, like figure out what other problems there are. And I saw other problems with different systems that they needed data on. And I suggested, I said, hey, why don't I do this? Why don't I build this? And by doing that, again, as a temp worker, some of the other managers started to notice me and said, you know what, I would love for that guy to be on my team. And so I was offered a role. And so that's how I did that. But even in that role, there was always like data problems. And so I would go around and I would try to solution some of these problems. And every time I saw a problem, I would try to come up with some type of solution. I was at Expedia for about 3 years. Yeah. My time there, I built and managed 3 different engineering organizations, most of which were providing new services that they had not had before. After I outgrew Expedia, I felt like I outgrew the learning opportunities there. That's when I went to Microsoft. Again, like Microsoft, like I was teaching. I was part of MSIT, and I was teaching them, which is the Microsoft's internal IT group. Okay. And I was teaching people at Microsoft how to use Microsoft Power BI, which was at the time kind of a newer analytics tool to do a bunch of reporting and dashboards. And again, I didn't choose data; it kept choosing me, and so because that was always the problem. And so I was doing that, and then I was able to land another position within Microsoft with the Power BI team. And I was managing websites for all of Microsoft's business, different business organizations. But even then, like data problems were, with the website, there's always like, tracking what users are doing and using that information to make decisions on what web pages to build and what content to create, what was resonating with users. All of that ended up being data again. And so, I was on another project where we were consolidating data with website usage. And so I was at Microsoft for 2.5 years. And then now I've been at Salesforce for the last almost 2 years. Guess what I did at Salesforce when I first came in? I was on the data intelligence team and working on data governance. And I built a data catalog team to talk about metadata management and all this other stuff. And it's because, and this is what I tell people, like data is such a big area. It's more than data science. A lot of people will think of data and they just think data science. There's a lot of other fundamental technologies that are around that that are also booming because of data science. Data science is just one of those things, but things like data governance and data management and just regular reporting and analytics, like every company needs this stuff. So sometimes it's, for me, when I think about how I define success, it's not about creating a rigid path of I want to be a data scientist, and so this is what success looks like for me. And I think a lot of people do that. But for me, I'm way more flexible. Like I'm going to define success on work-life balance for my family, being able to work in an industry where I have a lot of options and choice.
Yeah.
Work in a company that I enjoy and a culture that I like. Like I'm way more open to the domain. Like it really doesn't matter what my title is. I do care about how much money I make because it influences my family. Because, I mentioned I had 2 daughters. Well, now I have 4 daughters. So
it's a lot of people to care about. Yeah. You got to consider them with every decision.
Absolutely. And so other things are going to be a part of that. Like, so I would encourage people to, like, there's a fundamental set of skills you should have, but they translate to so many areas. And to me, I think I'm living proof of that. I think I've had pretty much every title, and I've worked from marketing websites to infrastructure organizations to data platform to custom software engineering, because the base skill set that you learn as an entrepreneur, you carry with you. Because I didn't even when I think about my software consulting, I kept my advertising very generic. And when you do that, you get all kinds of people that have all kinds of problems that are not related. Some are data, some are software, some is all kinds of stuff. But I would take it because, that was my business, and I would learn it. I would either learn it myself or find someone else to help me do it. So I had a lot of folks like Chandrith Peth, Chad Baker. I had a lot of people that I would work with that would help me complete these projects. But so after a while, I kind of got into this place where I think I can do most jobs, decently. There's people that obviously can do better than I can, but I can do most jobs. And I feel like that is a strength.
Hey, you can learn yourself into any position.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I want to just back up a second. So a lot of people in boot camps, like they don't even know what a product manager is. So, they work either solely with developers or solely with designers or solely with data scientists. And they don't know about the product manager. So it's a foreign concept. So how would you best explain what a product manager is?
Sure. And the fact that people don't know about these roles it's heartbreaking, because if you're thinking about like a high paying tech job, there are so many jobs out there. Product management and program management are enormous. There are just as many in those categories than there are software engineers. And go test what I'm saying. Like go to like Amazon.jobs and check out their job posts. You'll see like 3,500, developer jobs, and you'll see 3,500 product and program management jobs. And they pay just as well. So I'll just put that out there. People need to check that out for sure. Okay. So your original question was, how would I describe it?
Yeah.
So again, like take this with a grain of salt. This is my experience and what I've been through.
So we're here for your experience.
So product management is really about understanding your customer. And this goes deep into everything that you build, right? So you have software engineers that build things. They think about scalability and architecture and strategy behind all of those technical pieces. But they need to know what to build and why. Like you can build something amazing, but if nobody wants it, who cares?
Exactly.
So it matters. Like I tell people about Windows Phone. Like people make fun of Windows Phone, but if you ever had a Windows Phone was actually dope. Like the actual technology, I still have mine. Like it was a good phone.
Yeah.
But the problem is they missed the market. It was too late. They jumped into the market too late. So it didn't matter how great the engineering was because nobody was building apps on it anymore. It was too late. So I digress. So product management is about being close to your customer, doing market research, and helping to design at a high level, and even as a business level, really, what your engineers are going to build. You're making sure that whatever you're designing from a product or service is actually going to benefit customers. And so you talk to customers, you do surveys, and then eventually when you do enough market research, you talk to enough people, or maybe you have a starting idea, and so you have somewhere to start. But you help to translate that into something that's actionable for engineers.
Yeah.
Because you can't come at them with a vague principle, right? So it's one of those things you got to have really clear conversations with your engineering organizations, and you guys build this together. But it's your job as a product manager to go out and define what we're going to build and why we're going to build it. So a lot of it is being very, very close to your customer and understanding the market that you're trying to hit really, really well. Now, on the flip side of that, you'll see program management jobs, and I equate that to they're almost like product managers, except they are much closer to engineering. And so a lot of what they do has to do with helping make sure that engineers are able to execute on time, on schedule, and on budget, right? So they help manage bottlenecks and dependencies. Like if an engineer needs resources and they can't get them, program managers a lot of times will step in and make sure that they get what they need and work with and coordinate with whoever they need to help the engineering team execute. So, but they're also a very critical role, also a very high paying, good tech role to think about, especially for entry level folks. I think it's a great way to get into. But for me, being product, a lot of what you do is around vision and strategy and even understanding the market. And to me, I really, really care about like not wasting time, like not spending a lot of time building something that nobody wants. And so I think I naturally make sure and recheck to make sure that what we're building customers want, because that's kind of potentially the foundation of your success.
Exactly. And then with product management, so what about like, data scientists and designers? Because we got some of them in the crowd as well.
Yep. As far as what they do?
As far as like how it relates to the product manager, like how you work.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the first one you said was data scientists. So data is everything. Okay. So I think that everybody should have some type of understanding of how data works. But they also have to remember that it's not just data scientists. Like data scientists is a very specific group. I mean, these guys or gals, they take data and they create these predictive models. But then there's so many other surrounding jobs with data, like data engineers. Again, I'm generalizing a lot here, but a lot of them will, build pipelines. So anytime you have like a million different systems in an organization, you need people to stitch some of that stuff together. And sometimes that's not about building physical integrations between these systems. Sometimes it's just about pulling data from all of these sources and linking them together in a way that business people can understand what it means, right? And so as a product manager, remember, I'm doing market research. I'm trying to understand what customers are saying and what they're doing. A lot of that is data, right? So, I'm making this up, but let's say at Salesforce, I want to find out if people want or even using a particular feature. Well, I could ask them, definitely. But then I can also look at their actual behavior. So anytime anyone does anything in a software system, you'll have people in the back end that are basically writing event logs. So anytime someone does anything, a little piece of a text file is created and it's put in a log storage place, and it's basically mapping and telling you everything that every user is doing within that system. And so as a product manager, that stuff is super valuable for me because I can make an assumption based on a few people that I talk to that people hate this feature. But then if I look at the data and I find out that they're using it like all the time, and I can see when they're using it and how they're using it, that's super valuable for me to start to try to put together a story as to maybe, I noticed maybe they always go to this feature, but then they immediately leave and they never actually use it. Well, what does that mean? It might mean that they have no idea how to use this feature, or maybe that they wanted to, and so they started, but then they stopped. Why do they keep stopping? And so the data helps you to kind of understand what that is. So data is super important for every software engineer to understand, because even if you are, building software, usually that data needs to persist somewhere. All the actions and things that people doing, it needs to exist somewhere. And so it's going to be recorded in a database. And so it's going to be a good idea for anyone to understand how that works. And so as a product manager, you got to get really good at analyzing data because sometimes, and again, it kind of goes back to asking questions. Like, what are the questions that you want answers to? And when you think about those questions, eventually you might be able to drill that down into specific things that you need from the data. Like a question like, do people use this feature? And so you might work with an analytics team or maybe a data science team and ask that question. Say, this is what I'm trying to do. And hopefully you can have a conversation with them and they can give some suggestions. And then you guys figure out what type of reports and dashboards you need in order to answer that question. But again, sometimes it's not just about asking a ton of questions. It's asking questions related to things that you want to influence, right? Mm-hmm. Like if your goal is to increase monthly active usage, which is basically the users that come to a site every month, an individual or that comes to a site, like the unique users, the unique user count. If that's something you want to influence, you're going to want to know how many come now. You're going to want to know trending over the last few months. You're going to want to know, if there's certain spikes in usage, what caused those spikes. So these are all questions because you're trying to understand how can you influence and have more people come to the site. Maybe there were campaigns that were ran for another part of your business that actually was directing traffic to your website. Maybe that's what caused the spike. And that might tell you, hey, maybe I should talk to more people and do more campaigns. So data is a really big part of what product managers use to kind of make those decisions.
Yeah, and like one thing you mentioned is like also marketing. Like product management is not just on the whole engineering side. It ties into marketing as well. So that's why I always think of like product managers like mini CEOs.
Yep, absolutely. Which is again why I think like if you can build an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, if you had to put yourself in a bucket, like I said, I don't really love titles, but product is a great place for you if you love that part of it more. Because a lot of that is it's just understanding people. If you're a good listener, I mean, if you're empathetic towards what people need, that kind of stuff is definitely transferable into product management for sure.
That makes sense. So I have a bunch more questions, but I want to make sure we get to the audience first. So I'm going to pop up some comments that have been showing up. So first, Alejandro saying, well said and so true. So I think that's when we were talking about just initial getting into tech and being an entrepreneur. We'll hit you with an amen. Then Professor Pratt was asking to build a company or to do a freelancer type thing.
So I love this question. What's the difference? So this is what I think is really funny because you got to remember, like even the hiring process, let's be real. It's a game. Okay. Because there is no way for you to evaluate how good somebody is by a 1 hour interview or a 6 hour interview. You don't know that person's potential by having that short of a conversation with someone. Okay. Yeah. So I'll put that out there. So the reason I say what's the difference is if you put freelancer or self-employed, that implies that you are a person by yourself doing work. And maybe that's true. But people will naturally discount you for that because they'll say, oh, well, he was just a freelancer. And I say, don't do that. Okay. Go get a business license and form a company. Be a founder and CEO, or if you don't want to do CEO because that sounds too big, be president or whatever you want, senior consultant. Go build a business. Okay. Because there's no difference because what could happen, especially, and this is what happened to me, I did start out as one person, but eventually I became 3 people, then 5 people, then 15 people. But my experience counted. And I'm not going to give people an opportunity to discount my experience because I'm working hard and I'm doing real work. And I'll tell you, like working for these Fortune 500 companies, it's not like I'm working harder there than I did by myself. I guarantee you're working harder as an entrepreneur. So don't let people discount your experience. People have a natural, respect for companies and business. So go file. A company is a legal status. Okay, go file the paperwork. That's not even that expensive. And go build those connections. Don't do it by yourself. There are communities out there. Meet people. One of the things that I started doing, I created a website called mentormesh.io. And that's exactly what I'm trying to help people do. Meet people, build these things together. So because all of your experience in a startup, even if the startup fails, is valuable. Because the number one question they're going to ask you in interviews is, tell me a time when you failed. I tell you, like, I get tired of being asked that question because I'm like, can we please talk about some wins? Because you guys always want to talk about how I messed something up. And you know, I've got a lot of stories about where I've messed stuff up too. And the reason they do that, obviously, they want to understand how you handle failure because it's a big part of tech. A lot of the stuff you do has never been done before, or very few people have done. So there isn't necessarily going to be a manual for you. So how do you deal with that? It means you're going to fail, but failure is okay. Failure is a part of growth. Being uncomfortable is a part of growth.
Gotcha.
This is all stuff that you have to get really good at. So to his question, just build a business. Don't call yourself a freelancer. You're not freelancing nothing. You're doing real work, right? So be a business and do real work.
Nah, I like what you said, because like now I think about, like, if I see on someone's LinkedIn, even if it said Professor Pratt LLC, I'm going to think about that differently versus if they have like two freelance projects and they're just listed as freelancer. So I like that. But build a company and talk to people.
Absolutely.
So going through other comments, Varsha was just agreeing with what you said about the entry level.
Yep.
Kumar Sama being a great point on problem solving. So we got Professor Pratt again, talking about data now.
Been an educator for 16 years as a data scientist and analyst. So, and so the question is, how did you start, or how do you market myself?
How to market himself.
Well, like I just described to you, data is everywhere. It's everything. With the existence of cloud computing, which has kind of like allowed us to use hardware, and only pay for what you use, and these companies like AWS and Microsoft and Google, like creating these massive data centers, it's made data so important, right? So even as far as how you market yourself, like, don't think of it as roles, right? Again, market yourself as a problem solver. And I don't even know if I would be so specific as to say data problems, unless you really, really want to be in that area. Because especially when you're starting out in tech, you want to get really good experience. And let's say that you start a company and you want to focus on data. Okay. Don't arbitrarily just start a company. Do a little bit of a research, right? Yeah. Because your goal, like even if your goal is not, it shouldn't be, this is just my opinion, it shouldn't be to be a data scientist. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of us choose the type of role that we want because we assume that we're going to like that kind of work. But if you've never done that kind of work, you actually don't know if you're going to like that kind of work. So to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to make that decision early on. So I would choose different things a little bit more abstract, right? You want a high paying, flexible tech job. Okay. And if that's what you want, or you want to be able to have transferable skills, you want to be able to work remotely, like those kind of things. Okay. All of that stuff drives you to tech. My thing is just get in, because once you get in, then you learn what you really want to do. Because once you work for these companies, you can network with whoever you want, right? And you get to know these people. And as you get to know them, you can talk to them about their jobs. You can learn what their actual job is. You can even take like side projects to help them in your current role and actually learn. Do you even want to be a data scientist? Do you know what they do every day? It's like 80% data cleaning. Yeah. Is that what you want to do?
Brutal.
So, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but don't make that decision early on. So I would say be flexible. So if you're going to start a company, I personally would be a little bit more generic. Now, there's definitely value in, specializing. So I'm not going to say don't do that, but I'm saying do your research and think about who you're connected to, who you know, how you would even market, and even your local area, because there's value in providing a local business that support. Like I would go as far as to say, talk to your local businesses and see what they need. Offer really, really cheap or even free services just to get your foot in the door. And if they like you, of course, they'll pay for your service later. There's a lot of things and ways that you could look at it. But I would say don't be afraid to be generic. And then as you get these new businesses, solve the problem. Don't deny a contract because it didn't fall into your realm. Do it anyway. This is an opportunity for growth. You might even find out that you like it better than what you think you do. So the goal is not to be a role. The goal is to be successful. The goal is to have a good quality of life. The goal is to enjoy what you do. And I would even argue that even when you work for a company, who your immediate boss is and the culture of your company dictates your happiness way more than your role does.
Yeah.
Because if you got the best job in the world, but you and your boss do not get along, guess what? You hate that job.
It's not gonna be fun, man.
Yeah.
Great thoughts. And like one thing I'll add to Pratt's question, in terms of where to market yourself. So you said you're an educator for 16 years. So you're an expert in education. Like,
there you go.
You can go directly and work with education companies and say, hey, 16 years of this kind of experience. So that's one advantage that bootcamp grads have over, just someone coming out of college is like you have usually professional experience in some other field. Utilize that and you could break into a field quicker.
Yeah. And that actually kind of brings another really quick point. Like you got to remember about tech. Tech is every business now. It's not like it used to be. Like tech is not some industry by itself. Every company, whether they like it or not, has some type of tech need. So even like to your point about being an educator. So ed tech is a thing. Educational technology is a thing. Like, and that industry is blowing up. Fintech, financial technology, insurtech, insurance technology. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. There's some type of technical component. So if you have been an educator for 16 years, you are an expert in education. All you need maybe you got to learn some technical skills, or even better, find somebody that already has technical skills and partner with them and build something together. There's so many opportunities. And one of the examples I love to use is Nike. So Nike is one of the world's top fitness athletic brands. But they just hired, I think it's John Donahue as their CEO.
Yeah.
He is the former CEO of eBay and ServiceNow, which is another big tech company. Okay. He is a tech leader who now is running a brand company, right? An athletic brand company. And what does that tell you about Nike's direction and what they think what they think is important, right? Their technology platform, their ability to sell online. All of those technology components are so important that their number one leader is a tech leader, not a brand leader. So you're going to find this all over the industry, every industry, finance, insurance, education. There's opportunities, especially, and I hate to say it, given the world situation, but everybody's online now, 10x, 20x. So online experiences are going to go crazy. There's opportunity right now. So right now is a great time to be an entrepreneur. Yes, there's going to be a lot of other entrepreneurs, but usage and opportunity is also growing with the number of people willing to start a business. So, your job is not to dominate the market. You just need a part of it, a piece of it. You don't have to be $100 million company. You can be a $5 million company. You can be $100,000 company, and that is still success. Mm-hmm. So
there's room.
Be practical. Yeah.
All right. So next question from Will: how do you become a product manager?
So I've kind of said that. Be an entrepreneur. Build a business. Go do it. That's what product managers do. So, and the reason I say that too is, so think about like, I try to use a lot of analogies, but sometimes I'll forget what I'm talking about. So bear with me. Imagine you're gonna play in the state championship at basketball, right? Are you gonna wait till like the big game to practice basketball? Of course not. That's ridiculous. So if you want to be a product manager, don't wait until you get a product job, right? Like do it now, right? Dribbling a basketball in your driveway is still experience, and it helps you get familiar with how to play the game, right? Same deal. Start a company, be an entrepreneur, especially in product. That is exactly what you're going to do. You're going to go to let's say you're able to get a job at a big tech company. Okay. Your job as a product manager is to understand the customer, understand the problem, and help design solutions. There is nothing stopping you from doing that right now. The world is filled with nothing but problems right now. Okay. Go pick one. Do the market research. Find people on LinkedIn that have maybe are in that area and try to have coffee chats and get to know people, build your network. Go solve those problems. And I would say, especially with product management roles, your job is to be an entrepreneur. Your job is to solve problems. And there's no reason for you to wait till you get a job. Start a company, go solve problems. If you don't know, if you need help, join communities, work with people, join mentormesh.io. I'd love to help you figure out what you need. And we've got, hundreds of people on there that I'm sure might be willing to help you with your idea. But go do it, right? To me, I think product management, I wouldn't say it's the easiest, but it's definitely what you can start now. There's nothing stopping you from finding a problem, doing your research, and trying to solution what that could look like.
Great stuff there. So next question is from Ashley, who I know is a designer. So she says, should you be careful when pointing out issues outside your scope, or do you find the response to be positive from most management?
So there's two answers to that. And so one is, so it depends on your company culture and the people you're talking to, right? Like some people are just going to be sensitive. Okay. And certain cultures hate that. But here's my opinion. You should always be courteous. You should always give constructive feedback, right? Like don't be belligerent. Nobody likes that. But don't be quiet. Absolutely say something.
Yeah.
Because if they are a good leader or the group, if they can take it in a constructive way, that's how you build better products. That's how you do better work. And if your team or your management or your company doesn't like that, man, find another company. Because I tell you, like I've got a lot of people that didn't like it when I speak up, but a lot of those people career-wise, I have left them in the dust. And I'm telling you, it's because I try to be very courteous and I'm very nice with people, but I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm going to tell you if I think we're going the wrong way. So don't be afraid to have an opinion. And it's okay because it's not a right or wrong kind of scenario, right? Everybody has a different perspective based on what they've done in their life and even their personal life. It impacts the way that you think. And we all have an opportunity to provide value. The worst thing you want on a project team is 10 people that think the same way.
Yeah. And like what I'll say also about speaking up is if they're not listening to you, then that company is probably screwed. So even if they won't like implement your advice or take action, as long as they listen, that's what's important. But
Yes.
like with everything, you can't. There's always other kind of reasons why you might not be able to take action on a certain item.
Right. But you're right. Like even as a leader, think about what that does to your team. That even if you don't take what they want, you listen.
Yeah.
And if you do take that in and that becomes part of the project, people become personally invested now in the project more than they were before. It becomes less like a job and more like something that they care about. And that's what you want. When people put their passion into their work, that's when you get the best product.
Amen. So we had Alejandro. So he said in need of a mentor. So like Jay mentioned, mentormesh.io.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Yeah, I would encourage anybody that's interested in looking for mentorship. I would welcome you onto the network. A lot of what we do right now is a lot of live streams and group mentoring because, I have other mentors that are there that are from other big tech companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Google. And what I'm trying to do is to create a culture of learning and community because everybody's kind of at a different level of their journey. But I want people to lean on each other. And I want to try to grow a community where we can help each other, especially through like the imposter syndrome times, because we all have that. And I try to tell people that is, feeling like an imposter, all of us feel that. And you're always going to feel that as long as you're growing. So it's actually a good feeling. If you're super comfortable and you think you're master of your domain, then you need to change jobs because it's going to stunt your growth if you don't, right? So as far as finding a mentor, I'm happy to connect with anybody that's interested in connecting. And, I provide as much as I can. And I try to at least be scalable by publishing as much as I can and providing, resources in the community so people can learn from each other too. And we've had a couple of groups that have kind of spun out and they do things on their own. And even in the site right now, I mean, a lot of people, when I tell them to start a business, they get very unsure of themselves. And I totally understand because I know what that feels like. So I'm actually going to walk the entire community through how to do a startup and we're going to build one and we're going to take it from ideation all the way to profit and we'll see how things go. But I think that a lot of things in this world are a lot more attainable than you think. I mean, even if you think about where I am in my career now, like I said in the beginning, like I was an office assistant, and now I'm a technical director at one of the top tech companies in the world. And I didn't get here by accident. And I didn't get here because somebody gave me a handout. There's a certain way to approach work and to approach people building relationships with people, having a really strong work ethic, being passionate about what you do. There's definitely a formula to do this.
Well said. So Professor Pao was giving us some love on the Windows Phone. HC2.
I have it somewhere here.
And I guess I'll explain. Hector said, "Nice thoughts, Jay."
Hey, Hector.
See, Rudolph has a question. So, I understand how to gain experience as a software developer by doing skill building and personal coding projects. How do you gain demonstrable experience as a product manager? So, I know you want to say be entrepreneur again, but what about one more thing?
Man, but that's like the big thing. That's like the everything. How do you demonstrate experience as a product manager? I mean, I'm sorry, but it's you build a product. Like that's how you do it. And you got to remember too, like the interview process. I mean, especially because this sounds like you're trying to pass an interview. Okay. Here's the reality, and I mentioned this before. The whole interview process is a game. Okay. You have to learn how to play this really stupid game because it's not reasonable to really evaluate somebody's skills in that short amount of time. Okay. And so the industry has tried all kinds of different things in different ways to try to do that, but it's just not reasonable. You can't know somebody's potential that quickly. But there is something to be said about learning how to play the game. There are certain questions that are always asked. There are certain scenario questions that are always asked. So thinking about and understanding what those questions are and trying to maybe even pattern your experience or trying to get that kind of experience so that you can answer that question. So like, for instance, one of the reasons why they always ask, tell me a time that you failed is because they want to know about what you did, right? So don't be afraid to fail because people that learn only from, like, let's say a coding boot camp or college, they've only learned the right way to do it because the book is going to tell you exactly how to do it. But if you've ever tried to deploy a website, for instance, you'll find some mistakes that you didn't realize were there.
Yeah.
And that's what they want to hear about because what that tells them, you've done this before. You're not just somebody who read a book. You've done this before because, if I'm somebody and you're about to do open heart surgery on me, I don't want somebody that's only read a book. Like I want somebody that's actually done this before, even moderately. Right. And this is the same thing. Like if you're being hired as a software engineer, you are working on the internal heart of this company. They want to know, can I trust this person? Have they done this before? So you're never going to get around the experience part. It's not a fair thing. But at the same time, given what I've said, there's actually no excuse for you not to go do this today. Right. Because even if you can't find clients, if you don't want to go that route, build something. Find a problem, do your market research, and go build something and test it. You're going to learn so much, even if the whole thing falls over and it fails. Guess what? Now you have a failure to talk about. Perfect. You can talk about how you tried this startup and these are the decisions you made and it just didn't work. And this is what you would do differently next time. So to me, actually, I think and I know I'm a broken record, but I can't emphasize this enough. Like we live in a very unique time. Think about even with cloud infrastructure, right? Like there was a time that if I wanted to build a website that could host and handle 1 million users, I had to actually physically go out and buy that hardware. And the worst thing is, let's say you buy a really cheap piece of crap and then 10 million people come to your website because it's a great idea and then your server crashes. The opportunity loss would be heartbreaking, right? Or the other side, you spend $10,000 on this amazing setup and only 3 people come to your website. That you've wasted all this money. So cloud computing has completely transformed that. Now, if you just learn the tools and all of the education is free and online, you can set up and configure environments that scale based on usage. So you can experiment and come up with an idea and a concept. And if 2 people come, you're charged 30 cents. If 10 million people come, your environment will scale and hopefully, it's revenue generating and you just made a whole lot of money off of that and it'll offset your costs. This is a super unique time to be in. So it really is no excuse for you to try. You just need to ask and you need to do the research. So yeah, that's how you become a product manager. You go build a product.
Yeah. And one thing Rudy mentioned was also the personal coding projects. So I'll say, Rudy, if you build those coding projects, build it with some other people and then lead it and you're a product manager. So
there you go.
That's the easy way.
and don't call it a coding project. Like get your buddies, build something and release it to the public.
Yeah.
It's not a project. That is a product.
Exactly. So Anna said, excellent question on that. Kumar, can you please elaborate on how you managed to change the strategy with minimal resistance? Forget the exact question. This was on.
Strategy.
We'll Kumar, if you're still in, just clarify, and then we'll get to it in a second. So Gloria was loving everything, so hitting all the juicy keywords. She's quoting you. Her inner me is fluttering, and she Will also giving you some love, and then Professor Pratt, as well as Ashley, and then Mario. So I agree. I worked for 6 to 8 mechanical engineering firm, 16 years, collaboration culture. So boom, yeah, he's an engineer already. So easier transition for you.
Yeah.
Let's see, Andrew, I graduate boot camp tomorrow. I am going to start a business, $120 for a business license. If you have some heart and grit, you can make it happen.
Yep.
You convince someone in 1 hour, man. That's powerful.
And I'm telling you, if you don't have $120, I'll give it to you. Just give me 90% of your ownership. I'm just kidding.
That's a great strategy.
But even still, like you'd be surprised if you network and meet with people. A lot of people will go on this journey with you. Then you don't have to go alone.
That's true. Exactly. You can always recruit people and sell your vision to them. So we got Rudy again. Being an entrepreneur of a startup is a 24/7, 365 commitment. How do you recommend committing yourself fully to your startup while trying to pay your month-to-month bills / balance at 40 an hour a week job?
So this is again a great question, and the time that we live in is so amazing for business. So when I say do a startup, I don't mean that you have to build everything from scratch. The reality is, regardless of what you decide to do, there's probably bits of what you want to build that somebody has already built.
Yeah.
And you can leverage that because, to your comment about the 24/7, okay, that's important. And what I tell people is when you do a startup, if you are going to build something custom, only build what is unique to your business. Everything else, go find a service provider that actually already has a working solution. And then again, this is just my personal opinion, but like Salesforce is a great customer relationship management system. There are many of those out there. Don't build that. Use your innovation to build something that's not in the marketplace already. That's where you put your creative energy. And so if you use other services that again, like these services already have operational teams, they already have 24/7 support, they're already up and running, and they have operational teams that are sustaining them right now. Use their infrastructure and you focus on what's unique to your business, right? Like if you have, there's website hosting companies, they're going to monitor your website and make sure that it's up. Like there are ways to only focus on what's original to your idea, and then you can go at your pace, right? Use other services as you can, because you'd be surprised at how many companies out there have services that you can use. So, and that's one way to get rid of operational overhead, because then you don't have to worry about like, is my site up? Like hopefully the company that you're hosting with is making sure that your site is up.
Yeah, it's easier than ever. And Rudy also, so one solution is using a no-code solution. So our internship platform for Prentus is built on Bubble, which is no code, and like you could add custom JavaScript and back-end server scripts for it. But it has a lot of what you need, and you can get up and running really quickly. But going back to kind of something Jay mentioned earlier, is build something useful. Do research before you even start building, because what you might think everyone wants, like they might not want. Do research first, figure out what they want, and then build.
Right. Because the goal is not to do one specific thing. The goal should to be successful, right? Exactly. So if you want to be successful, build what people need, build what they're begging for. Then you're going to have a higher likelihood of success.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So let's see. Ashley hit you another great advice. Gloria just signed up for Mentor Mesh, said it's not everyone accepted.
There's a $1,000 registration. I'm just kidding. No, everybody can join. No. If for some reason you're not in, I think one of the admins just need to approve. So Nathan, I think you're on the call. If you could make sure she gets approved, then you'll be in.
Sounds good. Then it's like Josh Ellis. It's just so good. Listening in background while building a project. Hopefully it's a startup. And
awesome.
Andrew is the one that is going to buy his business license. So he said,
all right. Was that for the 90%? All right. I hope it's a good idea.
Oh, and then just posting another question. So how did you learn how to price your work out as a consultant? Did you monitor your competitors and base it off of that?
So how did I learn? Yeah, absolutely. Because if I'm posting my rate, other people were posting theirs. And so I would look to see what other people were charging. I also happen to know a friend of mine, Chanrith, who I ended up working with quite a bit, and he's also part of Mentor Mesh. He was telling me about how Microsoft was charging like, $230 an hour or something for consulting. And this was like, how long ago was that? Like this was like 20 years ago or 15 years ago. So I didn't know, but he told me that. And then plus I would look just on sites and actually definitely look at competitors. There's nothing wrong with looking at your competitors, right? Because it tells you a little bit about the market. Like if everybody is pricing it a certain way, then probably your customers might be used to that price point. So it could be kind of a little bit of a baseline for you. So even if you decide to undercut, I wouldn't undercut dramatically because you don't want to sell yourself short too, because a lot of people probably think like me in that you don't necessarily choose the cheapest vendor, right? You kind of like sit in the middle maybe. You don't want to pay the most, but you don't want to pay the least either. So don't be afraid to look at competition, pay attention to what they're doing because potentially they've already done a bunch of market research and maybe that's why they're choosing this particular area. But at the same time, do your own research, right? And because you don't want to debase everything that you do based on what other people do, because they could be wrong. And then you went down a path that didn't make any sense for you if you would have done the research.
No, that's exactly it. So then Hector was asking about, he wants you to share some stuff about Mentor Mesh. So I just threw up the link up there. You can explain like really quickly on what you're building over there.
Yeah. So Mentor Mesh is, it's a community of lifelong learners. What I'm trying to do is bring other tech professionals like me onto the platform because I understand how difficult it is to find mentorship, but I also understand how much time savings and value come from talking to the right people. So all these education, boot camps, and college careers, all of that is great. Those are all tools. But I also think it's very valuable to meet and talk to people that are in the jobs that you want to have. If you want to be a product manager, you should talk to a product manager. And so the idea is I want to bring students together that are already potentially going to all of these camps or just people that want to learn, bring you guys together, help you form teams, help you form businesses, because that's a big part of what I want to help people do, and get to know each other. This is a network that could potentially be with you for your entire career, because there's never going to be a point where you don't wish you had somebody more experienced than you to give you advice. And so I'm hoping that this network becomes that for a lot of you.
Perfect. And yeah, just to finish up, Gloria was saying great. And then also
I did mention that we're going to be working on a project. So if you want to join the team and work on the project and either succeed or fail with us, you're absolutely welcome to join.
All righty. And then last question. So recommendations for raising to the top of the pile of resumes at companies, like the ones you worked at. Resume girls combo.
So this is, again, like a very easy answer. And I want to tell more and more people this. Networking is everything. If you get a personal referral, you go to the top, period.
Yeah.
Because as you can imagine, like you even just said, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people apply. How do you get on top? Well, that's how you get on top. You got to know somebody. But then how do you know somebody? You build your technical network. What that does not mean is pinging people on LinkedIn and throwing your resume at them. Okay. That's the worst way to start a relationship with someone. Okay. You have to think about the long-term journey, right? When you first meet somebody, you don't ask for a favor. What I tell people to do is, yes, reach out to people on LinkedIn, ask for a coffee chat, tell them you like what they do and you're super interested. You want to be a data scientist too, and ask for them to share their experience with you. Don't ask for a favor and can you get me a job? That's very, very short-term thinking. You should build a network for the long term. And if you do that and you build relationships with people and you actually care about them as individuals, you check in with them every few months, ask them how things are doing, maybe ask them a question, care about their knowledge, be interested in them, and you can build a trusting network over time. And then eventually those same people will refer you to the jobs that you want. They absolutely will. So build a tech network and get a referral. Referrals are everything, because the only way you really know somebody is really good is if you've worked with them before.
Yeah.
Even that's not 100%, but it's way better than a resume, because I'm judging you based on how well you wrote your resume. What if you used the wrong keywords, but you're amazing, but you just didn't write it right? So that's why referrals are super important in the industry. You get referrals by building a network of people that trust you and that either have worked with you or can speak to your character. And so again, this is mentormesh.io. This is the problem I'm trying to solve, but you build your network and you get referrals. That's how you cut the line 100% of the time.
Exactly. You hear it over and over again. So that's it. So let's close out. So yeah, thank you so much, Jae, for sharing your knowledge. I know everyone was really hyped in the comments. If you want to get more of Jae, you can, follow him on LinkedIn or Twitter, Jae and Tech. So it's written right below. But otherwise, again, thank you so much, Jae. I learned a lot about product management, about networking, and I love that you support everyone to be an entrepreneur, because that's one thing I tell people as well. It's scary, but it's good advice.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate being on the show.
All right, thank you. Have a good night, everyone, and thank you for joining. Until next time, bye. There we go.
All right. Hey, can you tell, like,